Good day everyone. We are going to discuss Fitz and Posner stages of motor learning. So, here is the overview of our topic. And at the end of this video, we are expected to know the background of the theory and its definition, its brief origin, the founder or philosopher, how we can relate the specific theory to dance, sports, exercise, and the relative strengths and weaknesses of this theory. I am Bailey Shane Catanos, and let's talk about the background of Fitz and Posner's theory and its definition. In 1967, the first three stages of continuum of practice model was developed by Fitz and Posner. Fitz and Posner stated that learners proceed through three distinct learning processes that differ in their cognitive demands. Fitz and Posner propose that during early stage of learning, motor skills are attended to in a step-by-step process and thereby require the application of declarative knowledge, and these stages are the cognitive stage, the associative stage, and the autonomous stage. And in each stages, learners have certain characteristic or certain problems needed to solve so that they can move on to another stage. At the cognitive stage, learners expend cognitive energy to understand how they are supposed to move. The learner primarily focuses on what to do and how to do it in this stage. In the process of learning what to do, the learners need to acquire the information about the motor movement using more of cognitive ability to analyze. So sa stage na ito, since it is the beginner stage or the beginning pa lang ng journey ni learner, it is more on analyzing pa kung paano niya gagawin yung movement. Kasi nga, nasa first step pa lang yung learner. Skills are performed consciously with a lot of mental effort put into movements. Kaya nga sa stage na ito, maraming errors na mapapansin sa learner since hindi niya pa ma-determine kung ano ba yung dapat na gagawin in the particular movement or the motor movement na ginagawa niya. Learners are unable to pinpoint what these errors are and do not know how to correct them by themselves. That's why, tinatawag din itong verbal motor stage or verbal cognitive stage kasi at this stage, kinakailangan pa ni learner na ma-assist kung paano niya gagawin ng tama yung skill that he or she is performing para magawa niya yung certain skill. Since we are done with the first stage, which is the cognitive stage, let us move on and discuss the second stage, which is the associative stage or the motor stage. Where after an unspecified amount of practice, performance starts to improve at this stage. At this stage, the learner is now associating specific cues to solve the motor problem he or she is facing. And at this particular stage, smaller errors and better consistency is shown because the basic fundamentals have been established and now being refined. Naturally, performance variability will decrease here. The learner expands a lot of conscious effort here, oftentimes focusing primarily on body movements. Learners are now able to pinpoint some of their mistakes and properly correct them by themselves. So kung sa cognitive stage, ang learner is unable to correct their mistakes, dito naman sa associative stage, the learners are now able to pinpoint some of their mistakes kasi meron na siyang further knowledge about the specific movement which he or she is doing. But at this stage, ito yung stage that normally the longest time to complete bago ma-proceed ni learner yung third stage, which is the elite stage or what we call the autonomous stage. So let us now talk about the elite stage or the autonomous stage. This stage is the stage na nakarating na si learner sa elite stage. Movements are done almost automatically with little or no mental effort required at this stage. The movement is performed with few to no mistakes. And the learners are capable of pinpointing and correcting mistakes by themselves dito sa stage na ito. Kasi nga, doon sa associative stage, That is the longest time or doon na stuck si learner. So, pagtungtong niya sa autonomous stage, the learner is now knowledgeable enough to perform the specific movement na ginagawa niya. So, this is Fitz and Posner's model of motor learning. The cognitive stage or the first stage, and the second stage is the associative stage, and the third stage is the autonomous stage. At this slide, this is Fitz and Posner's 3 stages of learning. Na-indicate dito yung stage, yung process, yung characteristics, and yung other name for the different stages na ginawa ni Fitz and Posner. So, the first stage is the cognitive stage. Yung process is gathering information. It is more on analyzing. The characteristics is large gains and inconsistent performance, since this is the very first stage. And the other name for this is the verbal motor stage. So, sa associative, the process is putting actions together, since doon naman na inanalyze ni learner yung specific movement na gagawin niya. And small gains, disjointed performance, and conscious effort. And the other name for this is motor stage. Sa autonomous naman, the process is much time and practice. And the characteristic is performance seems unconscious, automatic, and smoothly done. And the other name for this is the automatic stage. So this ends the background of Fitz and Posner's theory and its definition.
Hi, I am Jemima Salam Kalumpang, and I will be introduces the origin of Fitz and Posner's stage of motor learning. So who was Paul Fitz and Michael Posner? So they are both psychologists. But later on, we will know more about these two persons, who really they are. But first, we will talk about the origin of their stage of motor learning. So, Fitz and Posner presented their 3 stages of motor learning in the year of 1967 in the book entitled Human Performance. And the purpose of this book is to create framework for studying human performance based on the physical and intellectual limits of human being. The 3 stages that they presented in this book, this was explained lately before me. These are cognitive stage, associative stage, and autonomous stage. And that stages, up to these days, are considered applicable in the motor learning world.
Hi there, this is RJ Christian S. Cresilier, and I'm about to discuss on who are the founder or the founders of Fitz and Posner's motor learning theory. So, who are they? So basically, as we evaluate into our minds, we will realize that according to the title of the theory, there are only involved 2 persons, and that is Fitz and Posner's. So basically, there are 2 founders of this theory. And now, we will identify and we will going to know who are these founders deeply. So first, let us know Mr. Paul Fitz. So who is Paul Fitz? Paul Fitz, or Paul Morris Fitz Jr., was born on May 6, 1912. And sadly, he died at May 2 in 1965. He was a psychologist at the Ohio State University, and later on, he moved on to the University of Michigan. He developed a model of human movement, the Fitz Law, based on rapid end movement, which went on to become one of the most highly successful and well-studied mathematical models of human motion. By focusing his attention on human factors during his time as Lieutenant Colonel in U.S. Air Force, Fitz became known as one of the pioneers in improving aviation safety. So therefore, as what you have noticed and as what you have listened, this Paul Fitz is not only a psychologist, he has also became a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force, which is pretty interesting. There are also indications Fitz worked in some capacity as a consultant concerning the interview of alleged US UFO witnesses and was planning work on how terrestrial psychological explanations could account for UFO sightings. But sad to say, he did not fulfill his duty to study UFO or how terrestrial or psychological explanation happens because he died. In 1965, now he died unexpectedly at the age of 52. He was the president of Division 21, or the Division of Applied Experimental and Engineering Psychology, of the American Psychological Association, or APA, in 1957 to 1958. The association now was a Paul Fitts Honorary Award. From 1962 to 63, Paul M. Fitts was the president of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society. He also received degrees in psychology at the following universities. So therefore, Mr. Paul Fitts did not only receive one degree in psychology, but there are the three of them. Namely, the University of Tennessee in 1934, Brown University in 1936, and University of Rochester in 1938. Now we are done on discussing on who is Paul Fitts. And now we are down into the next founder of the Fitts and Posner's motor learning theory, Mr. Michael I. Posner. So who is Michael I. Posner? He was born on September 12, 1936. He is an American psychologist who is a researcher in the field of attention and the editor of numerous cognitive and neuroscience complications. He is an emeritus professor of psychology at the University of Oregon, or Department of Psychology, Institute of Cognitive and Decision Sciences, and adjunct professor of the Yale Medical College in New York. A Review General Psychology survey published in 2002 and ranked Posner as the 56th most cited psychologist of the 20th century. In 1957, Posner received his DS in physics, and in 1959, his MS in psychology from the University of Washington in Seattle, Washington. In 1962, he received his PhD in psychology from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So, as a whole, Mr. Posner has contributed a lot in this theory. The reason why they are committed to each other because they are both scientists, specifically psychologists. So therefore, they collaborate to each other to form this kind of theory. And I hope this could help learn on who are the founders of Fitts and Posner's motor learning theory.
Relate Fitts and Posner stages of motor learning to sports, dance, and exercise. Fitts and Posner stages of motor learning is a useful tool to understand the physical changes that occurs in the body as we improve our physical capabilities. The model describes 3 stages of learning, which with each stages describe different changes in the body and mind. This model is particularly interesting to think about in the context of sports, dance, and exercise, as we often see improvement in those disciplines after the first cognitive stages of learning, which are the smallest changes to the body and mind until the autonomous stages. For example, when I joined cheer dancing, my coach explained what is cheer dance and the objective of being part of it. At kung ano yung gagawin and proper execution ng iyong katawan by performing those skills na ituturo nila sa amin. In that way, it shows the cognitive stages of Fitts and Posner theory. When it comes to associative stages naman, dito mo makikita yung improvement kung ano yung tinuro nila as their student. Dito mo din malalaman kung ano yung techniques mo, kung paano mo gagawin ng madali yung skills na ituturo nila sa atin. When it comes to autonomous stages naman, dito naman you perform those skills na itinuro nila with consistency and accuracy. Kung ano yung ipapagawa sa'yo, alam mo na yung proper gripping, techniques, at kung paano mo mas madaling gawin yung skills na ipapagawa nila sa'yo.
The strengths and weaknesses of Fitz and Posner's motor learning theory. So the strengths of the said theory are the following. First, it provides a good explanation for the role of attention in behavior. Second, it may offer athletes a various guidance as they approach and develop their personal mindfulness practice. And lastly, it highlights how important to overcome the word process in information and even in the human body adoption and learning. All must go in a process. And now we are down to the weaknesses of the said theory. So the weaknesses of the Fitz and Posner's motor learning theory are the following. First, it is a little outdated or unspecified for fully explaining how the body controls movement. Second, it only highlights on what is the stages that learners experience rather than how to do it well, specifically the prescribed motor skills or actions. And lastly, it neglects other motor learning considerations, such as biomechanical changes we observe, which is according to Bernstein's theory, the changes in perception and visual cues, which is according to Gibson's theory, and the neural substrates of motor learning, which is according to Wolpert's work. So as a whole, the strengths and weaknesses of the said theory are just the evaluator on how we could use the strengths of the theory and how we could improve the weaknesses of the said theory. And that would end our discussion for today.